Clooney. Is Clooney the correct pronunciation?
Yes.
Right,
So you're Scottish, you're going to find it fine. I found out there is a place called Clooney now, the Hillocks of Clooney, the Vale of Clooney.
Oh, okay.
Up in Scotland.
Interesting.
So
Probably is.
you have to move there.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah, the French and the Scottish are the only people who tend to get it right.
Oh,
really?
interesting.
Yeah. Because they've
The
got
French.
a Clunie monastery with a Y on it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Where does the name come from? Do you know?
It's a long, boring story.
Let's go. I'm here
Okay.
for long, boring stories.
So my mum was reading a book about the guy who used to run this quite progressive school, I think it was in the 60s, 70s, called Summerhill.
Okay.
And the premise of that was that the kids who'd been like excluded or like suspended from school would go there, and they had a really different schooling system. So he'd just say, well, if you want to come to lessons, you come to lessons. And they'd like not go, and eventually they'd say, I'm kind of bored, I want to come
Want to do a
along.
lesson?
I want to do a lesson. And I think it was quite kind of revolutionary. But his sister was called Clunes, which is my full name.
Right,
But it's
okay.
always been Clooney. So I don't
There you go.
know why.
I like
but
that.
Yeah.
So was your mum expecting you to go to that school? Or?
No, she just liked the name. I
That's
think.
cool. That's wicked.
Quite
Yeah.
unusual. It's very
Yeah, it is.
It's very unusual.
Yeah.
It makes it embarrassing for me because by the time I've finished saying, oh, I like George Clooney, so people actually understand it, I can't remember their name. And so it's, and then they remember my name, and I'm bad with names anyway, so it's very embarrassing for me.
I'm really
Don't worry.
bad with names, and since we started doing more and more of the podcast, I think I've been getting worse. I don't tend to meet like a lot of people. I meet the
Yeah.
same people all the time in my previous work. And now that I'm meeting more and more people, I'm
Yeah.
like I called someone the wrong name on the podcast. Like
No,
multiple
that was his
times.
second name.
I called him by his second name,
So
sorry.
it wasn't
Yeah.
completely wrong.
Yeah, but I'm just not great with it, so I'm trying to be better at
Yeah,
it.
I know.
But particularly in America, when they got their last names are their first names and
Yeah, the
their
other way
first
around.
names are the last names, it's
Yeah,
like, yeah,
Oh, come
double
on.
confusing.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
quite.
Yeah.
So tell me, who is Clunie Fretton?
Yeah.
What a question. Gosh, I don't know. No one's asked me that before.
Well, we're here to explore
Here
it.
I am.
Yeah.
I guess, so I'm a master wood carver and do gilding, letter cutting, restoration. That's what I do professionally. I guess, do you mean, who is as in,
Yeah, like,
Who is in any sense of the word?
Any
Or just
sense.
any sense of the question?
because it's funny because people
Yeah.
usually tell us what they do rather than who they are.
it's
You know,
quite, that's quite a
funny.
difficult
Yeah, it is.
philosophical
It's a
question,
difficult
isn't it?
question, isn't it?
You asked Florian Gadsby that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Was it Florian?
Ah, it's Florian, that, yeah.
Who are
Yeah.
you? Not what do you do? It's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And he'd said it's the first time he'd been on like this type of media, like a
Yeah.
podcast or something, Makerspace, that someone had asked him that instead of what do you do, which is why I really like asking the question, because we've all got to where we've got to because of a long list of events that happened before it, and that long list of events is what makes us who we are to get us here.
It's quite difficult to sum up, though.
It's really
What
difficult.
has anyone actually asked you? What would you answer if someone asks you?
Oh.
Yeah, now the tables have turned. It's
Jack's usually good at answering these questions.
I'm just somebody that's really interested in interesting people and things.
but is that who you are, though?
That is who I am, effectively. I'm just,
Yeah.
like, look at all the weird and wonderful stuff I do. Like, it's just because I'm interested in stuff.
Yeah.
I think my
Yeah.
LinkedIn profile is Jack Lenny. If it's interesting, I'm in.
Yeah.
that's nice.
Pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good tagline.
But this
Yeah.
isn't about us. This is
I know,
about you.
I know.
You're trying to turn it round.
I know. I guess if I try and... Yeah, I suppose I'm interested in traditional things. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing the kind of heritage, like, carving work. I guess I like to know how things are made. That's whenever I learn about something, I want to learn a lot about it and find out how it works. Like that's the thing I find most interesting. So if I go to a gallery or a museum, I want to understand how it's been done. I think, oh God, that's beautiful. How have they done it?
Nice.
And yeah, my dad was a musician, so he'd listen to music and then he'd say, you know, listen to what they're doing here, listen to how this is changing, listen to, like, try and separate out, pull this like instrument out of it and try and listen to what's happening there. They're doing something really clever.
Yeah,
So
analysing.
So he was interested.
Yeah.
He was listening to the individual musicians, not the band.
yeah.
He was
yeah,
interested,
absolutely.
or not the piece as such.
Listen to it, enjoy it, and then pull it apart and understand how it works, and then listen to
Yeah,
it back together, and you've got a richer experience.
I do love these videos where they take a boot, for example, and they take it all apart to see how
Yeah.
it's made. Something
Yeah.
like that, yeah.
Yeah. One of my favourite
Fascinating.
YouTube channels is Rose Anvils. He just cuts boots in half.
Oh, really?
Just to see exactly how they're all made. And then he obviously reviews them and like, are these
Yeah.
made? So knowing how different things are made, is that, do you think it was your interest in knowing how things are made, or was it your dad imposing in the correct sense of the word how to pick things apart that then became your interest in how things are made?
Oh, no, I think I think everyone has that, the kind of curiosity about how things are done. But I think if no one ever tells you how to ask the questions or how to understand what you're looking at when somebody explains, you need people to explain things to you. But even little kids, they want to know how things are made. So if I'm doing gilding or something, and they come along and they want to understand like what the gold leaf is, and I can explain to them, and it's more interesting because of that. I think, I don't know, some people feel like it takes the magic away, but all you get is like smaller and more detailed. It's like looking under a microscope. It doesn't get less magical. It's still amazing. It's just you can see more of it.
You can understand more of it as well.
Yeah, that's the exciting part.
Mm-hmm.
So,
for sure.
Yeah.
Was the wood carving the first love? No. Has it always been wood carving? Where did it start?
No. I did actually. I had a book I really enjoyed. I think it was by Michael Morpurgo when I was a kid, and that talked about. There was a really nice description of a wood carver in it, and I found it like so exciting, the idea that you could make. I think he was carving birds, and they were described as being really realistic, and I really liked that idea.
It's amazing.
I asked my dad for like wood carving stuff, and he very sweetly, we were very poor at the time, so I was like imagining hammer and like a mallet and chisel, and he got me a scalpel and some balsa wood, and I was like, oh, it's not really what I hoped for. So I don't know, that was in like the back of my head, but I didn't come to carving until I think I was about 23. So I did a lot of drawing, and I really enjoyed that. And at the time when I was thinking about training as a carver, I was also considering training as a concept artist, because most modern art schools don't really teach drawing, and it's very frustrating. You go in and you like draw your feelings, which is fine, that's nice, that's a thing to do, but it's nice to know how to draw properly before you do that. So I always say to people, look at Picasso's early work. He was a fantastic draftsman, and then he did the abstraction stuff. But it's
but it had the key concepts down.
Foundational stuff.
We sat in on a workshop with Sarah Garvey, who's a Arizona-based leather tooler, I suppose you'd call it. But in her whole class for like 3 days, when she was over in Amsterdam, was just teaching people the fundamental of drawing. Because she's like, tooling's cool, but you can only do tooling once you know how to construct a curve.
I was drawing straight lines for hours. And like even just like, the way to use your arm and your body to like do the scroll, and I was just like, you don't get taught that. You just don't. And
I guess, fair enough, if you've got a primary school teacher, their specialism is probably not going to be like artistic drawing, but I feel like something's lost, because if you do that as a kid and you have people supporting you, even if you're just messing around with pens and pencils, you gain a lot of the muscle memory and kind of fine detail stuff. And I think everyone knows if you want to play an instrument, you've got to practice your scales. And everyone thinks art is this just like natural talent that just happens to some people. And you say, no, you can practice. It's really good to be taught. But if you practice, you can get very good. You might not be like Michelangelo, but you're going to be so competent that most people won't be able to tell the difference. And it's really weird, because some people are really excited by that, because they think, oh, wow, it's all within my grasp. I'm not a talentless idiot, like my art teacher told me. And other people are really dispirited, I think, because then it means that they're not good at something because they can't be bothered, rather than because they, don't have a natural talent. Like it's. I guess it's a nicer way of thinking about it. If you're like, oh well, I could have been a great musician, but I just don't have the talent, rather than saying, oh, I didn't put 10,000 hours into it.
There seems to be a lot of that, doesn't there? And I think now more so than ever, maybe with the rise of social media, which I'm a massive fan of, but all as you ever see is a highlight reel, and you'd see beautifully curated things. What you don't see is the 10 or 15 years to do the thing. Or
even the stuff looking rubbish. And I'm guilty of this, because there's so much of the stage of carving, when you're carving something early on, if it's big, it just looks like you're really bad at carving. Like it looks like a big, blobby, vague mess. But it's true. It just and if I post things like that without any context of what it's going to be, like, I made the mistake of sending a picture to a client once and saying, look, it's in progress, and he was like, oh, will you be working on it more?
This is just a process.
Rough out one.
No, don't worry. But it's really, it looks a lot like incompetency, and so showing that part, I think, is really difficult for people. Like at least with a pot or something, you can show it from a lump of clay into a pot because maybe that process is going to take, an hour maximum. Yeah. So whereas with carving, it's months, sometimes months for a big project.
Yeah. I hear
so
that.
It's a little bit more embarrassing. And sometimes if you're not sure whether you can actually, if you're still wrestling with the model or whatever and it looks like a terrible lump of clay, I don't always want to share that part because I think, God, I need to know it's actually going to be okay before I show this terrible bit.
People can be horrible on the internet, right?
Well, even if they're not, I feel embarrassed by, until I know that I can make something nice, I don't like sharing the halfway process of me fumbling about with modelling materials.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because I think it would be a better place if we all did share all that, because it would also communicate with customers that, look, there is a lot of steps, whether they're nice steps or bad steps, but there's a lot of steps to go into something.
That's a really hard thing.
Like putting all your wares out to the world.
Yeah. It's hard to explain to people where the value is in craft. I guess you guys know this, but if it's always the time, and people never think it's the time. So if Felix and I make the same thing, so if he's a stone carver, I'm a wood carver, and my partner. So if we both make the same object, people are going to value the stone one more highly because they think, well, it's stone. You've had to physically cut it out of the ground. It's got to be way more valuable. And obviously it does cost more than wood, but realistically the biggest cost is in the labour, which is kind of about the same between stone and wood carving.
Is it?
Yeah, not dissimilar. We get to use a lot more machinery to cut out outlines, but then lots of stone carvers can use angle grinders or air hammers or something like that. It's about par, I think, but it's
a perception of
whereas, and if something's got gold leaf on it, people go, oh yeah, of course it's going to be
that's
that
probably
much.
the quickest bit, surely.
Yeah,
gold leaf must be quicker than doing it.
Not always. I mean, some of the gilding processes are slower, but it's weird. People always place the value in physical materials. So I've spoken to people who work in silver versus jewellery, and it costs basically the same minus the material cost of the gold, and people don't want to pay it because they're like, well, silver, it's not.
It's not got that sort of prestige, does it, in the same way?
Yeah.
How do you convey value in your work as a carver?
With difficulty.
Is it?
I think often people already are aware of it from being interested in craft, or maybe working with craftspeople before, but I guess maybe I should talk more about how long it takes. But I think a lot of the times when people want something made, they go, I want this thing, I found a person, I like them, how much is it going to cost, and when can you do it by? So they don't really engage with the process, or even if all of that stuff was up on the website or in the social media or something, people might not be aware of it. But I notice, especially when we have an open studios and people come around, there's a kind of shock that things cost the amount they would, which I can understand. You can go to IKEA and get something really nice for really cheap, but it's a difficult thing to explain in a short moment. So I don't know how people compress stuff into a social media reel. I don't know.
It's hard.
It's very difficult. There's also that thing as well. I think that's to convey the worth is on us as makers, but it's also not on us to convey the worth. It's not that we're overcharging, it's that everyone else is massively undercharging because it's massive volume of scale.
And made in places with really bad ethics, and for you to get it that cheap, someone's suffering somewhere, so it's not comfortable. And but if you pay nothing for something, you don't value it either. If you've got to spend a lot of money on some clothes, you're going to really look after them. And I guess that's just the way we are, and it's difficult. Not everyone has the luxury to save up and buy one really good thing rather than multiple bad things. But it's a shame. I hope there's some pushback.
I think there is. I think it's happening. We're in the midst of it now, I think.
I just hope it continues.
So tell me, drawing to wood carving, when did that start to happen? So when you were 23, is that when you started full-time carving? What did that all look like?
So that's when so basically in the past, if you wanted to train as a wood carver, you would apprentice to a big workshop. So a big carving, stone or wood carving workshop. Some of them did both. Often you work in both materials. But that sort of declined in the last century. So I think 70s, 80s was sort of last big workshops were closing down.
Right.
And the places that were taking on apprentices and people going through that scheme. So maybe some people will still do a bit of apprenticing in maybe frame making. That might cover some carving and some gilding, but not all of the skills.
When you say frame making, you mean like
a
high-end picture frames?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that's maybe like one of that or restoration studios, again, declining quite a lot. That might be, those are some of the last places where you might learn like in a workshop. But there's a college in London that I think they were set up in the 1870s, something like that. So City and Guilds of London Art School, and they were set up by lots of the guilds, livery companies were originally involved in helping it.
Right, okay.
And I think they were combined with the City and Guilds Institute, which is now split. I don't know, the technical intricacies have escaped me, but they teach stone and wood carving. So
is their whole setup based on like traditional guild crafts?
So it's just the stone and wood carving. It's traditional. Right. They have a conservation department, which I think obviously deals with all of that, but they also do kind of more like modern fine art stuff as well.
Right.
Okay. So I think they still teach quite traditionally.
Okay.
But it's obviously not the same experience you'd have, if you apprenticed for it's a 3-year course, so that's great, but it maybe an apprenticeship in the past would have been 5-7 years. So you also maybe get more time to do, explore sculptural ideas, and so there's different things that come out of that. But that's sort of the only place now for people who want to train as a stone carver or wood carver to train outside of a kind of one-to-one apprenticeship. Do you want to?
No, I was just checking that we're still recording.
Okay.
We've had a few issues with the battery pack where it's cut half out, but I'm just checking it's definitely doing its job. Okay. So that's the City and Guilds.
City and Guilds of London Art School.
Right.
So they're the only place in the UK that teaches like a full-time carving course. I think there are some places in Europe. So there's École Boulle, I think, teaches some carving, but they do more kind of like cabinet making, Boulle furniture style. And I think there's a place in Norway that also teaches wood carving as part of...
There's not many.
Is that the one that's linked to Nittedal, to the church?
That's definitely the main one that I know of.
Yeah, they do lots of like handcrafts.
Yeah. There's a place in Norway, and I'm sure it's in Nittedal, the church.
I think is it quite far north?
Yeah, it's pretty far. It's like just above Trondheim.
Yeah.
It's a cathedral.
It's a cathedral, not a church. Sorry, you're absolutely right. And they teach all the skills to keep the cathedral nice.
Yeah, so
they're really cool.
So they're also, so there's a couple of places across Europe where you can learn more traditional skills.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's also there's a Florence Academy which teaches traditional painting, sculpture, and drawing. So they really, again, you're learning to draw properly and you're learning to sculpt properly, and it's very rigorous. So if I'd known about that at the time when I started training, I possibly would have ended up there instead.
Right.
But I came to carving originally because I'd wanted to improve as a draftsman, and none of the modern art schools taught any drawing. I went around loads of them, and they all said, we had a life model and a drawing room open all the time, but no one went in, so we shut it.
Really?
Oh, wow.
I mean, why are you telling me this on the tour? This is not a positive.
Yeah.
So, but the training for carving, you do very rigorous drawing, and the drawing tuition is very. In an ideal world, you should be able to sit and draw something so accurately from the many different angles that you could then recreate it from carving. So in practice, that would probably be quite hard, but at least you have those skills. You know that that's sort of a possibility.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So you come up
to learn.
Yeah, you come up with a very high level of draftsmanship, which I have to say, as in my case, has declined quite a lot. I draw in a very workmanlike way now.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Which I'd like to change, but it's.
But you probably couldn't draw in that workmanlike way to carve had you not had the skills to draw in such a competent way.
So I drew before, and I arguably made more beautiful drawings before I trained, because they were just the only goal of the drawing was to be a nice drawing.
Yeah.
But the goal of drawing training was to make a drawing that's useful to you for doing the work. So I probably draw less attractive things now, but they're more useful. They have a larger purpose.
So I think about that often when I'm doing engineering drawings for guys in the workshop in my previous work, that like if I'm doing a drawing for me to go and fabricate something up, it's very simple.
Yeah, of course.
Whereas if I'm doing one for some unknown entity who will be a better fabricator than me, I have to do a really, really good drawing because they don't know everything that's in my head. So you're kind of doing the same thing, aren't you?
Yeah.
There's a lot of aspects here that you just know because it's your project, isn't it?
Yeah, and also, there's a financial pressure to not spend all of your time producing a really stunning drawing when, the more time you do that, the less money you earn on a project. So you want to get through, you want to have something that's as accurate as possible, So the main process of carving is you would start with a drawing. Let's say you're carving a sculpture, and it's a new design. You start with a drawing, and then you move on to making a maquette or a small model, and then you move on to maybe a full-scale model, maybe not, and then you carve from that model. So you've made all the mistakes in the clay. Ideally, you make your worst mistakes in the drawing and you fix them, and then you make the model from the measurements of the drawing. And if you're good at it, it's going to be nice and accurate. You're not going to have to change that too much. And then by the time the model's finished, the client doesn't really have the choice to make too many changes after that, because you say, this is it, this is how it's going to look. And you might change some kind of fine details, but in an ideal world, you're not changing a load of stuff on the fly in the carving because it's more difficult, there's more risk. And I mean, some carvers do, some carvers like to work that way. I do not like to work that way.
Yeah.
I like to know what I'm looking at, and all of the time you spend making something look exactly how you want it, it's not wastage. So I struggle with students sometimes because they want to get right into the carving, and I say, well, but the more time you spend drawing and modelling it, the better you're going to know the thing when you come to carve it.
Yes.
So you're going to be quicker at the carving.
Makes sense.
Because you know the thing you're making.
It's a real technical approach, not and I don't mean this in the negative term, not the arty-farty approach. It's not the I just feel it and it just happens. It's a real I've done the drawing, I've done the clay models. So these white ones behind you, are these the clay models? Yeah,
so this one was actually made in plaster.
This one was made in clay. What's that made from?
So they're both plaster. So the eagle was a little maquette. So it's only finished on like one side. You know, it'd be nice to finish that, but that's another example. I say, okay, well, this is what it's going to look for half of it. I don't need to finish the other half, in the sense of the scale. And that was quite a close measurement to the drawing. So it was an interesting commission because the client wanted something that was halfway between a naturalistic eagle and a heraldic eagle. So I don't know if the animals in heraldry are they're really, really stylized. They're quite unusual. So it was interesting finding that like halfway point that he was happy with.
Explain heraldry to me.
Oh, okay, heraldry. So
this is what I found most interesting when I met you last Sunday, is that the history aspect of your craft is very much there. Yeah. So explain the heraldry to me.
Okay, so heraldry is a nice example because it's still like a very alive part of carving. People are still regularly commissioning coats of arms to be made. So in the past, heraldry has its origins in, on the battlefield, basically. If you had a shield and you were fighting someone, you wanted to know that you're fighting the enemy and not your own person. If you're in full plate, people can't see you. So all the flags, the standards and the shields you were given like devices and kind of ways of dividing it. So you would have like, half of it red and half of it white, or, so something to tell people apart on the battlefield. And over time, they added in different sort of devices to show, well, this person's a duke because they have this particular type of crown, or they have the helm kind of facing the other way. So when it came away from the escutcheon, the shield is the kind of basics of all heraldry. But when escutcheon's like a fancy name for a shield, basically. Right, okay. That's one of the things it's called. But the full like what you think of as the full coat of arms, it has like the animals, like the shield, the load of mantling at the back, the kind of helmet on it. That's properly called an achievement. Right. So that's that's what the kind of whole thing is, but it incorporates bits off the battlefield. So it became a kind of symbol for each person's family or lineage. So it passed down through the firstborn male line. So I think very, very rare if it was passed down the female line. But I think I meet a lot of people who say, my surname is Smith, and I've looked up and the Smith coat of arms is this, and I think, well, do you have unbroken direct descent from through the firstborn of each? Because otherwise you don't have a coat of arms. So, but there's a kind of romantic notion about it. But some people have inherited coats of arms from all the way back hundreds of years back.
But it would only ever pass, from what you're saying there, and correct me if I'm wrong, it would only ever pass through the firstborn male lineage.
Exactly.
Unless in an odd circumstance.
I think possibly. I mean, I'm not like heraldic scholar, so probably there'll be heralds who watch this and be like, you've got the stuff wrong. But basically, I think there are situations where, for instance, if there was only a woman, only a daughter left to inherit, then possibly another family would marry in and adopt that surname in order to continue the line. Right. But I think that was quite unusual. Right. But for instance, if say you had a coat of arms and you had a son, two sons. The first son will inherit your coat of arms, but the second son might be entitled to have a different device put on that made it related to your coat of arms. But so if you're in the nobility, you get these branches of different kinds of coats of arms. So people who really know they're kind of heraldic scholars, they can look at and trace all of the history back. And
that would be fascinating.
That would be fascinating.
Yeah, and so we still, there's officially, you probably know if you had a coat of arms. Right. Because some of you'd have,
because you've got a massive mansion in the
country. Possibly. It's
above your
Who could say?
8-poster bed, and
but there's two bodies in the UK. There's the Lord Lion's Court in Scotland, and they award or they grant coats of arms, and they also trace people's genealogy and check, if you have a coat of arms, and if you say you got given like an OBE or something, that there are certain awards and honours that entitle you to have a coat of arms. So you would then go to them and have one commissioned, and they would make it out of symbols that cool. Meaningful or family history. And in the UK, in England, it's the College of Arms in London that deal with that. But people are still obviously awarded honours regularly, or they have done something that distinguishes them enough that they want to apply for a coat of arms. So in theory, I think you have to have done important things in your life that mean you deserve a coat of arms.
We'll get one of those for We Are Makers one day.
Yeah.
I know who's going to carve it for us as well.
I'd love that. I have to warn you, if you go to the College of Arms, it's fantastically expensive, and I think they've just put their fees up. So I think it starts at somewhere around 12 grand.
Probably won't get one of these.
well, never say never. If you make huge profits.
Yeah, quite. Is it a good tax write-off?
Yeah.
Is it marketing expense?
Yeah. So, but it's nice because people still get them, and they're very proud of having a coat of arms, and it's something you can pass down. So I think lots of people also get quite interested in the heraldry and the history as well, and so they'll commission what you get when you're given a coat of arms. You get your grant of arms, which is a lovely kind of document and stuff with all of the details on it, saying, in this year the king grants, all of this stuff, and what all the symbolism is. But you also get what's called a blazon, which is a written description. I'll have to look some up for you later, because they're so kind of like, there's such interesting phrasing.
So many people about this week. This has been like my fact of the week since I learned it off you on Sunday. I'm like, did you know?
No. Let me actually, I'll try and find because it's such interesting old language. But the premise is that the written description is so specific. It lays out in a really precise order exactly what's on all of the shield, exactly how the shield's divided, what colour everything is, what supporters you're entitled to, what the helm is going to look like. So it's really, really precise. And
because am I right in saying from speaking to you last week that you're not actually allowed to reproduce an existing one, because that is plagiarism, isn't it?
Well, yeah, ideally, I mean, I know that probably in copyright law, if I reinterpret a drawing, I would have changed it significantly enough, but it's kind of poor form if you're just copying another heraldic artist's work. It's not, I don't think that's very classy. I mean, it's not to say it's never done, but it's I think you'd always...
At that point, you just become reproduction, don't you? You lose the heraldic art of it. You just reproduce it.
And just look on a baseline level as well. What works in 2D is not necessarily going to be great working in 3D. So there's things that, maybe would be carved, be drawn in a drawing that are going to look lovely. But if you render that just into timber as it is, it's going to look weird. So there's some arguments for not doing that. So here we go. So there's this is George III's first coat of arms. So quarterly first, per pale dexter, gules, 3 lions passant garden, or, and that's and then it says sinister or, a lion within a double tressure fleury, counter fleury. So you can see it's quite kind of old-fashioned language. Yes. So this is quarterly is how the shield's divided. That's divided into 4. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be taxed here per pale. I can't remember. It's describing how it's. I should know this. This is terrible. I'm under pressure now. So gules is the word for red.
Gules is the word for red.
Yeah, I think it's related to lots of old French. And there's 3 lions. Passant garden is like. God, I got to get the proper book out. It's terrible.
So there is like a translation aspect to this.
And look, if someone who just worked exclusively in heraldry would know this inside and out.
Yeah,
and it's probably embarrassing I'm saying this, but and then or is the word for gold. So it lists each thing in order in a way that means that you would get given ideally in a kind of like the most like minimalist coat of arms commission, you would get given just the blazon. I would look at and double check that my understanding is correct, and then do a drawing based on that. Wow. And I wouldn't be given loads of references for
really?
Yeah. Wow. So sometimes, obviously, most people, they've already commissioned something, or the College of Arms has issued them a nice drawing already. So they probably have references, and it's nice. But I think it's sometimes it's a bit of a battle to explain to people. They don't just want to have like a replica of that drawing. You know, you're commissioning a piece of artwork. Why? It's like going to a tattooist. You don't just, like, why would you pick one just off the wall? You would they're an artist who can make you something that's going to fit your body specifically, and I guess
have a little bit more meaning too.
Or my favourite one is when people go to a tattoo artist and like they've drawn a thing and they want that artist to put it on. I'm like,
why?
At least give them some artistic, like, because they're really good at what they do. That's why you're going to them. Yeah. You don't want someone that's just, and I suppose a tattoo artist probably is a really good comparison, because you're not just going to them to stick the ink in you. We're not just going to you to move the wood. Yeah. Like, it's your artistic representation of it as well.
And look, some of the work I do is somebody just says, look, there's a historic panel and we need 5 more of them to fit in. And, you know, you have to, whether the original carving is nice or not, you have to copy it as faithfully as possible, which is sometimes really painful. So sometimes I do work for these, you know, really like nice kind of grand name buildings or whatever, but the actual thing I'm copying is a like horrible carving, you know. So, but you have to be faithful to that. I can't bring my, you know, style into it or artistic interest.
They all have to match, then.
And I think it's a sort of like sort of egotism if you introduce your own thoughts on how things should be into a historic context where you're supposed to be replicating what's there.
Yeah, I hear that. They're two very different things. One's a replica, one's you being commissioned for your work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but heraldry is a really nice example because you have this really tight brief. Everything has to be the correct colours, the correct, like the helm, particularly the orientation, whether the bars are gilded, like it suggests you're a different status or not. So in the past, if people, you know, misrepresented themselves in their heraldry as being higher status than before, then everything that had the coat of arms on it could legally be confiscated, which included things like, you know, whole suits of armour or like all your silverware. So really expensive mistake to make.
Jeez.
Nowadays, obviously, no one's going around checking, but it used to be a big issue if you were pretending you're a duke and actually you're not. You're not. But
so would you get different things added to your achievement, is what you call the whole thing, isn't it? Yeah. So you get different things added as you achieved more things, effectively.
Well, if the higher your status, the more of the kind of extras you're entitled to. So if you're just a gentleman, you have a grant of arms, I believe you just have a very simple helm, some mantling, and just the shield. Okay. But if you go up in status, you can be allowed supporters, which are the 2 animals or like figures either side.
Right, okay.
And then the helm can be facing in different ways. You can have a crown on top of the helm, or, you know, you can have different things that come in, or crown, maybe, basically there's all sorts of different places you can add things that show that you're much more higher status than someone else.
You've leveled up.
Exactly. So it's a way of showing off your status, I think, historically. And it's also fantastic. Cool. Even now, it's just like sculpturally, it's a really nice thing to work on, because you've particularly the kind of fancier coats ones. You've got these beautiful. You get to do beautiful figurative sculpture of the animals, and you get to the mantling, which is the sort of originally the cloak that would be hanging off. You know, so there's the sort of twist of fabric that goes around the top of the knight's helm, and then the kind of cloak that hangs down the back. And the idea is supposedly that the cloak has been slashed in battle, so you get this quite kind of decorative, not ragged in heraldry, but, you know, it's sort of in heraldry it's developed to be more in common with the acanthus leaf. So there's a lot of more kind of ornamental description, but in the idea is that you would the original inspiration is this sort of slashed, like battle-worn cloak that you have.
Okay. So it's like an artistic representation on something that's happened.
Yeah, exactly.
And presumably you would get that if you'd served in a notable battle or done like a medal in the modern day army, wouldn't it?
So I can't remember. I suppose maybe I should know. I mean, there are. I guess maybe awards of certain medals would entitle you to a coat of arms, but it's a bit misty. I mean, I've done a number of coats of arms and they're fantastic, but it's not like my bread and butter.
Right.
So I love doing them, but it's not, you know, it doesn't happen that regularly. So it's a treat when it does.
Yeah, quite. Yeah. So what is your bread and butter?
God, that's a difficult question. I don't know. I don't think I really have a bread and butter. I mean,
that's cool though.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps it interesting. It makes it challenging. Yeah. So sometimes,
different.
Yeah, sometimes sculptural work, sometimes restoration or, you know, replacement carving. If you know, like the example of if you need a panel, you know, 5 more panels, copies of the existing one to fit in with a historic building or something like that. Sometimes gilding work, so we do a fair amount of gilding in churches and things like that. That's nice.
Yeah,
always a treat. And gilding's a nice one. It's if I'm doing sculptural work and having to work out designs and stuff, then if I get 6 hours of really good constructive work, then that's a good day. But beyond that, I tend to make mistakes.
Right.
So
it's a long time.
There's a lot of decision making, and you can make the wrong decisions, and you don't want to. If I work too long, I make a rod for my own back the next day. But with gilding, it's mechanical. You're just sticking gold on something, so it's quite nice. I can work for much longer and more easily like that. Yeah.
And is a lot of it building restoration, historic building? Or is that where you find a lot of your custom from?
No, to be honest, I'd say most of my work is new work. So
cool.
It's rarer that. I used to do more restoration work, less nowadays. I'd say more. There's a kind of mix of people wanting. So I did a big coat of arms, a big George III coat of arms, which is why I had that description on my phone a few years back, and that was for a chap who'd done up a Georgian building, I think, that had originally been commissioned by George III, and he wanted a George III coat of arms to go in it. So people are kind of wanting to put carving back into older buildings. Maybe that's or you know, commission. I think lots of carvings you're being commissioned to make something for a space, which is nice. Yeah. So rather than me making a sculpture and just saying, oh, you know, sell it in the gallery, which I'm sure is lovely, but it's a different relationship to, you know, carving traditionally has a strong relationship to the building it's going to be in and the place it's going to be in. So a lot of, you know, with coats of arms, you have to think really carefully about what height is it going to be displayed at. So if it's going to be high up, if you have the coat of arms facing you directly, you're going to be looking at the underside of the chin of all the animals. So you're not going to be able to see a lot of it. So often they're kind of artificially tilted forwards. And the same, you know, the same thing with, you know, more, you know, if you've got little kind of display coat of arms, maybe you'd make it more intricate and kind of like exciting to look at close up. So
that's a really interesting way to think about it, isn't it? You wouldn't, like, I certainly wouldn't have thought about that originally. Even the helm on the top of it needs to tilt down. Like everything needs to change based on where it's going. Yeah. So to do a really good job of it, you need to know where it's going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same with stone carving. Often if you're carving something on the outside of a building, if it's going really high up, you have to make it really, really bold because it has to read well from the ground. And I think it's funny, sometimes you see carvings that look brilliant from a distance and they almost turn into kind of abstract shape when you see them up close, because there's such like high relief but far away the shadow makes sense. And so it's always even when making sculpture. So it's like this bronze, we're due to make another bronze next year, a big stag, which will be nice.
Oh, wow.
So that's going to be great fun. But again, you know, what distance is it going to be seen at? You spend a lot of your time kind of crouched down on the floor looking at something underneath and thinking, you know, is this, I'm actually going to be able to see it properly? Especially with portraiture, you don't want to just be looking at somebody's chin.
Yeah. That's quite a hard decision for someone to make that's commissioning you straight up, isn't it? Because they say want a stag for their beautiful big gates or something like that. It's like, do I want someone to see that as they drive in, or do I want someone to see that for the other end of the street? It's quite a big decision because you can't change it after that. I
mean, you should be able to make a sculpture that looks good at different distances, but particularly the height off the ground is a really important one. Right. Obviously, look, if something's on a pillar and you're far away, you're going to see it at a slightly different angle than when you're right underneath it. But that's kind of expected. Yeah. You know, if you go see all the kind of military like horse bronzes around town, you're familiar with that, but they're designed to sit in the space well and to read well from that distance. But there's just considerations about how the face is looking, particularly if it's a sculpture of a person, you want to, sometimes you want to be able to make eye contact and kind of get that sense that you're looking into somebody's face and seeing their expression. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
And what about the aging of these carvings?
Oh, how...
Because obviously your carvings, yes, they take a long time to do, but they're also going to last a long, long, long time.
Yeah.
There must be decisions you have to make in the design of that.
Yeah.
About the aging, if you made it really finicky and real, like the V&A one you done in the box there, that kind of has to be in a box because it's so tiny and.
Well, you could get it out. I'll turn it round for you. You can see it's actually. So this was.
It looks so delicate. I don't even want to touch it.
No, you get it out.
You're like, yep, that's fine.
So this was a nice one to do because this is actually. This is a replica of there's a famous Baroque woodcarver called Grinling Gibbons, and he's sort of people refer to him as the Michelangelo of the woodcarving world.
Right.
So he really brought carving in limewood to prominence in the UK. So he trained in Holland, and then came over here, and he's got. And there's so many stories associated with Gibbons, but the idea, the famous ones that he was just working away in his workshop in Deptford, and somebody walked by who said, "Oh God, what a fantastic carver! I must introduce him to the king." And that's sort of how his career took off. So I think everyone hopes they're going to be quietly working, and somebody sees them through the window, and as if
that's everyone's dream, right?
He was a very good publicist, Gibbons.
Right.
But so the V&A wanted to. They have a really fantastic series of films which they produce called "How Was It Made?" So they'll take an object in their collection and they'll get a modern craftsperson to recreate the object, and so they film the process and you can see it. And there's some brilliant films.
Need to check that out.
I know.
How was it made?
How was it made for the V&A? Nice. And they, for the Grinling Gibbons tercentenary, they commissioned me to recreate the cravat, so you could see some of the process.
Nice.
And the nice thing about this, if you flip it over, there's lots of things that. So I say in advance, Gibbons is much finer than mine. I mean, I'd like to have a second go because I was working from a 3D print, and that didn't necessarily capture all of the fine details. So I had to make some judgments about which chisels to use, and I'd like to go back in and have another crack. But you can still see that. It's quite robust at the back. There's a lot of material left.
Yeah, but it looks very delicate from the front.
Yeah, and that's the sort of trick of wood carving. You want to undercut. So undercutting is where we take all of that material away at the back, and you want to leave it looking like weightless at the front, but still have as much material stuck on the back that's making it sturdy.
Right.
So.
Without making it look bulky from the front.
Yeah, exactly.
So it all needs to be cut back at certain angles, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that again is determined often by where it's going to be seen from. So this is another Gibbons in the corner here, and that's a panel that was originally from St Paul's and is now was given to St Paul's Covent Garden, and they're doing some big kind of restoration works there, and I'm going to hopefully be working with them to.
It's good, to have people like you that can actually go and do it again.
Yeah,
like
you've still got the skills to do it.
Yeah, exactly as you say, Kate. Even the V&A's thing, how was it made?
Yeah.
Like to know that there is still craft people that you can call on, rather than the age-old Egyptian question, how was it made? Don't know.
Well, I think this is the biggest problem with wood carving. If you look at the Heritage Crafts Association, they have this red list of endangered crafts. So wood carving isn't on there, and everyone thinks it is. And I think that's the biggest problem with there being enough work for wood carvers. I mean, there is when people realise that it's possible. If they go, "Oh wow, this is really exciting. I never thought I'd be able to commission something like that."
Yeah.
And then they want to. But everyone says, "Oh, it's a dying craft." And I have to say, no, it's really healthy. There's loads of us. There's loads of people doing this. People training every year. It's really good. And it might not, we might not be in the absolute golden age of carving, but there are lots of people still doing it who still have the skills.
And you're teaching, aren't you, as well?
I teach, So I think the more people who carve, the better, really. I know, if you teach people as well as you can and they want to take it on, then at least, they still have some of the skills and they know where to, they know about the places they can train more in depth. And I think it's important, but it's difficult.
So you're not of the mindset of keeping it all to yourself, very clearly.
No.
You're like, more the better.
No, because and I've met people who are like that, and I think, look, if you've come up with a secret technique that no one else can do, fair enough. Don't go telling everyone about that. But the thing that makes me a good carver is that I've done it for I'm still new, But I compared to some of the people who've been doing it forever. But you know, because I've been in practice for nearly 10 years, no one can take the 10 years away from me. If I tell them how I do it, they still have to do the practice.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot, don't we? We talk about this with various other craftspeople, and I think David Bond, Lucky Bee, sign writer in Waco, Texas, was the first person to bring it up on the podcast. Was like, tell anyone anything. Like, I've got a few little techniques that are to me, but he was 30 years in. Like, it doesn't matter. He could tell everyone everything he knows, write it down for them. They still need 30 years of making their own mistakes before they're there, right?
And I think people are quite protective, understandably, because, you know, their income it relies on, you know, people coming to them. But, you know, realistically, if there's a client who is going to be swayed by someone who has, I don't know, like, I don't think someone can take, if I have a good relationship with clients and they trust me, then they're going to come back. And if they don't trust me, then, maybe we shouldn't be working together. They should find someone they do trust. But I don't think someone else knowing how to do a bit of carving, I think, look, I guess there's an argument that education is important. Maybe people who, I think you see this a lot in letter carving. So in memorials, traditionally you would V-cut letters into a stone, and all the lettering would be hand drawn. They'd be drawn by someone who was a specialist in doing that. They'd lay it out in a way that would look really lovely. V-cut ages really well. So currently, if you sandblast something, you get a kind of U-shaped profile.
Yeah.
And as the stone wears away over the years, you lose a lot of the definition. Whereas V-cuts, you always keep that really sharp, crisp line, and it reads really well. It lasts for longer. And
that's interesting.
But people who don't know the difference will go to maybe a memorial mason, and I think you can now officially be like a master carver, even if all you're doing is sandblasting the lettering and you're just using a font. So you're not hand drawing it. I think there is a certification now, so it's contentious. But you know, so someone who doesn't know the difference, they might not know where to go. So I think there's an argument to say, okay, well, I guess a hobbyist doing something with convincing patter could possibly take work, but that's always been the case, and it's always going to be the case. And better you try and, if there's someone who you feel like is going to do that, try and teach them to the best of your ability, so that if they do end up with a job where they're going in and restoring something, they're not doing it as, you know, they're doing it with more skill. So
rising tides raise all ships.
Yeah, and people want to help. You know, people want to help their local church, and the local church can't always afford to have a master carver come in and do the work. So I think nothing's lost. But
you published a book this year.
Yeah, I did. So
tell us more about that.
Yeah, so
because that is the physicality of everything you've just said, right? You've actually gone out of your way to publish a book.
So I was approached to write it, which was really nice, by a small publisher called Crowwood Press, and they do lots of niche publications. So look, I'm not going to be buying a Ferrari after publishing it. Let's put it that way. But what I wanted to do was pay forward the stuff I wish I'd known when I started carving. Because look, there's things you can't learn from a book. You need someone to physically show you some techniques, but you can learn all of the like timber technology or the tools, how you sharpen things. And there's a lot of the theory that you can learn, and it's a useful reference for me as well. Because when I'm trying to explain things to students, I can say, okay, here's a diagram that explains this, and we can talk it through rather than me doing terrible pencil sketches.
Yeah, okay.
But I think it's important to try and pass stuff on, really. And now I've been in business for long enough. I think I finally have something to pass on. So
and you're paying it. How you started that there, paying it forward, is I think a really important thing.
Yeah.
We sat in on a lecture from.
I was just waiting for you to say this again.
This is me doing the broken record bit for anyone that listens to the podcast. We sat on a lecture from the president of some university in South Korea, and he was talking about tacit skills, the skills that can't be passed on unless you've kind of got someone there saying you need to feel this, you need to feel that. Yeah. Is that something that you think so there's a lot of these kind of books that are put together by, like, Kate and I would never go and publish a book how to be a woodcarver. We speak to woodcarvers, but we're not woodcarvers. So there's an amount of that needs to be done by the people that have done the 10 years hard yards to be able to do it. Is that something you think you're able to convey in a book, or is the book just the drop in the just enough to gain interest? What's the hope with the book?
I think the hope with the book is that someone who's starting out will know a lot more about some of the basics, and also if you're a complete beginner, you'd know what tools to get, some of the techniques. Hopefully you could you would understand how a tree grows. Some of the history of ornament, which I think is really important, is often glossed over. But look, realistically, it's a short book. Well, it's a modest book covering a lot of subjects that you could write whole books about. Just look, you could. Each people
part
have
could be a whole book,
So I write. Look, I touch on drawing, modelling, casting, and I think that's really important to understand the process as a carver, and to understand the materials and the techniques and some of the methods. And then people can say, right, I want to explore silicone rubber moulding, or I want to explore how I make plaster waste mould. But they'll know the terms to then seek deeper information. Or they say, actually, I really love, 18th century French carving, or I really am fascinated by this period of the medieval. And then they have resources then, there's bibliography and lots of, now is online free, so out of copyright books. So people can then pursue it, but you have everything that goes into being a carver. So, if you need knowledge of historic ornament, you need to understand how a tree grows, how you process timber, what the properties of timber are, what your tools are, how you sharpen them and maintain them, how you measure things and transfer measurements from models. That's really important. You can't, otherwise you're just going to be free carving the whole time, which is a style, but it's not how people traditionally worked. Yeah. So you need all of those skills. I could write like a book on all of those things individually, but this hopefully is enough for people to get a sense of it, and then they can. Right? Yeah, and I've tried to be as in depth as I can. Maybe I'm doing myself a disservice, but
no.
But I didn't want to write a kind of tome this big.
That puts people off when it's too much. Like that to me looks like it's more digestible than a big Bible of how to do everything. And
it leaves the doors open for an edition 2, 3, and 4.
Yes, this is true. Maybe in another 10 years.
Was it a hard thing to do?
No, it was really nice to write.
Was it?
Yeah, because it's not like writing fiction. All the answers are already there. You just need to look them up or remember them or find a way of articulating them. Yeah. Nice. But this is useful. This was the book that when I started training, or I was 2 years into training, I would have appreciated having as a reference book. And there are some things now where I don't remember everything that's in this book, but it's useful for me because I can say, let me go back and look up, what's the calculation for working out, what the moisture content in timber is. I don't remember that offhand. Yeah. So it's nice to have that reference and to remind myself of stuff. So hopefully it's a book that is going to continue to be useful over a long time, but is also going to signpost you in directions that, where you can be educated about stuff. If you decide you want to become a full-time carver or a full-time sculptor, where can you train? Unless somebody tells you, you don't know.
It's
not quite. And like you says there, you don't even know what terms to Google.
Yeah, exactly.
To find that out. Like, Google's amazing, but you Google it's, excuse my language, it's shite in, shite out. Like, you need to know what to put in, don't you?
Yeah, and even with ornament, there's so many different niche words for styles of ornament or mouldings. What are all of the profiles that you might need to know? There's things that just having the search terms is is going to help you ahead.
Know what you're actually looking for.
Yeah.
And knowing all the skills you need to acquire in order to be good at this thing. So,
because some people where do I even start?
Yeah. And lots of, like I said before, lots of people think the carving's the important part, and if you can't draw, you're going to have a really tough time carving. So it might be too expensive to buy a load of carving tools and set up a whole workshop, but you can go out and draw practically for free. You need pen and paper. That's it. So that will make you a better carver. So it's a sort of hard one to wrap your head around, but I hope it gives people the whole kind of breadth of skills. And I think people often struggle to understand what I do. They come in and, if I've been doing gilding work, people are surprised when I say, I do carving. And because that's a part of finishing off carvings. And they go, but you do letter carving as well. I go, yes, I'm not a professional. I don't do that as my sole profession. Yeah. I'm not a master letter carver, but I understand enough to be able to do like basic Trajan and letter forms and stuff. So it all feeds into the same thing.
Yeah, being a carver is quite an umbrella term, isn't it? Yeah,
and look, realistically, if you're a good sculptor and you can use a chisel, I've said this before, if you're a good sculptor and you use a chisel, you're going to be a good carver.
Right.
So the skill of looking at something and seeing whether it looks nice and how to make it look nice, and how it should be, and understanding how it should fit in with historic ornament if it's going to have a place within that. That's they're kind of under the same thing.
So what are all the skills? We've kind of touched on it briefly, but then you're talking, being able to mould things, plaster. Like what are all the skills within the carvers or within your carver's repertoire?
So for me, I think it starts with drawing.
Yep.
You need to be able to model what you're going to make. So turn something 2-dimensional into 3 dimensions.
Mm-hmm. And what would that modelling consist of? Is that the clay side of it?
Yeah,
plaster?
Clay. You can use clay. You can use plaster. You can use more like oil-based clay. So anything that's pliable and you can cut back in, or you can tool and.
And are you freehanding at this point? Is it like measuring off the drawing and freehanding and scaling and all this?
Depends
sort of
what the sculpture is, so or what the carving is. So if it's something that has to fit within a really specific space, I'm going to have to constrain it to particular measurements. Or if say I've got a particular piece of wood that I want to make it in, I can't make something that's larger than the piece of wood. So there's some basic constraints. But if I was going to design something just for me, I would have an idea of the scale in mind, and then what I might do is model up a smaller version and then think, how does that feel? What is this? I think make it about the right size and think, well, maybe it could be like 10% bigger. Right. And then you might either work from that and scale up your measurements as you're taking them, or you make a larger one and play around with some things. So that's the sort of like development process, I guess.
And is that quite a quick and dirty iterative process, or are you trying to be quite refined at that point?
I guess it depends on. If I'm doing something that I know I can get away with doing a little sketch model for, just to get the rough heights, I can just get straight into the timber. If I'm doing something that I want to be really considered and precise, particularly if it's something that I then want to show to a client and convince that they should have it like this, then I'm going to take more time over the model. And that's also the time where I can figure out how I'm going to make some parts of it. So, how many blocks of wood need to be joined together, or... so the other skills, I think there's obviously decorative art skills. So traditionally, as a carver, you wouldn't necessarily, you could just be a carver. You might have some joinery skills. I'm happy to admit my joinery skills are very bad. Like I know the principles, but I'm not a furniture maker. The tolerances that cabinet makers work to. I'm happy to employ someone who's done their 10,000 hours in that. I could probably do like timber framing for a house, right? But it's not going to be.
Cabinet making's a different one.
It's not going to be 1/10 of a millimeter.
No, quite.
So there's some knowledge joinery would be really useful. If I went back in time, I'd probably try and train as a cabinet maker first, and then come to carving later. So that's really useful. But lots of people will just specialise just as working as a gilder or doing decorative surfaces. So that's joinery, like painting and gilding, those aren't, or even lettering, those aren't integral to working as a carver, but drawing, modelling and being able to carve are the 3 main ones. So there's other skills like making moulds or things like that. They're useful, but you don't have to have them. So they'll help out. So if you're making a big sculpture, you might not want to have a big wet clay model sitting there cracking out over 6 months. But so they make your life easier.
And what about wood choice? Like, how much do you need to know about wood choice, wood preparation? Because I've seen in the book there as well, there's very specific parts of a log that the wood should come from. I presume that's to stop cracking, maybe? Or...
Yeah, so wood moves, so it's a natural material. Stone will stay in the same place it's put. It's not going to expand and contract in the same way. I mean, possibly some stones, maybe there are some stones that do, but... Wood, you can reliably know it's going to move. So when it gets when the humidity goes up, so I've got a humidity meter next to the timber stack, and when it gets really high, I have to call. So can you turn the heating on? And the way it expands and contracts will determine how you join pieces together, and also whether the carving is going to deform. So it says, what if there's blocks of wood? Oh, okay, so you can see here, this has got these kind of circles, so you can see the growth rings there. This means that this is going to cup that way.
Ah, okay.
When it bends.
So it cups the opposite way from...
Yeah, it's like the circle's kind of unbending.
Right.
Okay.
But really what you want is quarter sawn timber, which is where the grains pretty much, well, as much as you can get it going vertically. And this means it's going to expand and contract at a really even rate, so the wood's not going to deform as you work it. So we always work, I mean, wood carvers usually work with seasoned timber, and this means that most of the deformation has already happened. So if you see like turners who work with green wood, they'll turn something and then it will move and crack, and there's kind of something beautiful in that. But it's not really what you want if you're doing a really fine carving, or especially if you're trying to join a carving into an existing thing. You need it to be stable. So you need to know some things about that, and you also need to know about where the strength runs in the wood. So where the grain runs up, like that up the tree, I think it's tensile strength. It's got good strength this way and that. So if you've got a full canopy and the wind catches it, the tree can bend that way without breaking. But if the grain was running up the trunk like that, then the lines of weakness will be going across and it would snap. So the same thing's true if you're carving something really fine and delicate. You ideally want the grain running up through the delicate bit rather than going across it. So there's some things about how you design things to work with the material you have. And it's not always possible. Sometimes you just have to be really careful.
And is there then a wood choice dependent on how intricate the carving is? You know, different woods are harder, more stable, etc.
Yeah, so some woods are, I think, it's interesting you say hard, because I think a lot of people think of, like, the classic one is to say, oh, well, you can often a carve in either lime or oak, and people say, oh, oak, it must be really hard. And there's this sense that it's going to be really, really difficult. And it's a bit tougher, but your chisels are really sharp. So you're still doing a lot of it, you know, not with a mallet. You're still doing a lot of it with just two hands, or like moving a chisel just with hand pressure. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
So this, I mean, I remember when I first found out, I thought it was it's really surprising. I thought you'd really need to like hit it, and you do with stone. You're not, unless you're working with something like alabaster or maybe some marbles. I think you can use wood chisels and work by hand.
Right.
But with wood, most of the work, the fine detail work, you're holding a chisel with one hand, and then the other hand's providing the pressure, and it's sharp enough to just cut. So
they're really sharp.
So they should be really sharp. Yeah. Not everyone's chisels are, and sometimes if you're working with a really tough wood, then some of the tropical timbers have silica in, so it really blunts the chisel as well, really fast. So in terms of wood choice, if I work, you know, the cravat that I showed you earlier, if that was made in oak, it would have been really, really hard to do. So oak is a lot more brittle and has a much stronger grain. So it's a really good wood to learn with, because you can't do a load of stuff that lime lets you get away with. So if you carve against the grain, it's just going to snap. And so it will make you understand grain direction much quicker, but it's much more...
And when you say snap, like splinters and chunks of it will physically snap
just
out.
Bits will just ping off. So anything that's in the short grain, the bit where you've got a narrow section with the grain running across it like that will really prone to breaking or crumbling in oak in a way that it might not in like a fruit wood or like lime wood sometimes. So there's definitely considerations to...
So what do you typically teach in when people come?
So usually lime wood. So Gibbons used lime a lot, and it's got a really good balance of like utility and also price. So it's got the best qualities short of like boxwood, fruit wood, you know, walnut maybe. But they're all more expensive. Lime wood tends to be cheaper and be just as good, and it's a really nice forgiving wood for people to work on. So they can carve in the wrong direction, and I can come and say, you're carving in the wrong direction, but it's not gone catastrophically wrong by the time I've got round to them. So it's good in that sense.
They leave with something recognisable as a carving.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really key to wanting to learn carving that actually you're enjoying the process, because if you hate working with the material, then you're not gonna come back.
Mistakes happen, and you need to know how to fix them.
And it's nice, but it's nice if the mistakes aren't so bad that you can't fix them. Sometimes you just have to get some glue and stick something back on. But you try and just make it. You try and just make it look nice. I mean, just roll with the mistake.
So, have you got a favourite in your carvings? Is there something that, like, to you just screams like, if I could do this style of carving or this thing under the umbrella of carving for the rest of my life, it would be this?
Oh wow. No, I think I'd get bored. I'm sometimes really envious. You see a lot of craftspeople on Instagram, and they have like the thing they make, And it sells very well because people say, I love that thing, I want to see more of that thing, I want to see that thing every day. And they just post variations of the thing, and they're beautiful, but I would probably get bored. So I guess I don't know, if pressed, maybe I could quite happily be stuck in the medieval era. Some really great carving, and I don't know, it's a lovely time when lots of people were making incredibly beautiful things, but in a like a lot of the carvings you'll see in churches are made incredibly confidently. So the ones on misericords, which are like the kind of folding seats in churches, often they'll have these amazing carvings underneath, and they're often really rude because you couldn't put holy things literally under someone's bum. So they got this kind of license to have these weird worlds where husbands were like where wives were beating husbands, and rabbits were hunting foxes, and like, you know, there's some really there's I can't remember where it is now. There's
like little hidden.
Yeah. They always try and have a look if you can. There's some really rude ones. There was one where there's a priest like pooing out a demon while another priest is like praying nearby. So there's some really weird stuff in there.
That's quite fun though, isn't it?
Yeah, they're really, really fun. So, but
they're on the bottom of.
They're like they're like often in old medieval churches they'll have like folding parts of the choir stalls or the pews, and they would. When people stood up to pray, the folded seat would have a carving underneath and like a little ledge, and it meant that older people could sort of rest a little bit and like So it's a nice, it's a beautiful kind of decorative carving, and often really skillful, but also kind of done in this like tremendously workman like. I don't know how to explain it. There's a real
banter.
But there's like a real immediacy to the carving as well. The same with the Gibbons. So when I looked at the original one, there are places where he's just like smashed through bits, and you think, oh wow, you're really confident in the the like strength of your carving to do that. You could see bits where like chips had kind of come out the other side and they're still there, and you thought, wow, you were just bashing stuff out incredibly confidently as a master. And the same thing in the medieval era. There's lots of things where you can see them they've just bashed out a load of these kind of quite wild carvings, and there's something really nice about seeing, like, it's not perfect. So often if you look at the kind of Gothic revival carvings Victorians did, they're like too perfect. They don't have the life to them. But often medieval carvings, they're really weird. They'll have really weird faces, but they're done by somebody very skilled. So there's that nice. I'm sure there's probably a beautiful Japanese word for that quality.
Probably,
I don't know.
There's a beautiful Japanese word for most really nice things in the art space, isn't there?
Yeah.
You gained your master's. How did you? What is the journey to gain a master craftsperson?
You can see your certificate.
You've got a certificate up there.
Yeah. So there's for carving, there's the Master Carvers Association, and they're the oldest body awarding mastery, like peer-reviewed body in the world, I think, awarding mastery in carving.
And that's not just wood carving, that's
wood
carving.
And stone, yeah.
Right, wood and stone.
Wood and stone. And when you apply, you select the categories that you feel you've achieved mastery in. So it might be heraldry, gilding, letter carving. I think there's lots of different specializations. And then your work is reviewed by your peers, and they can say, well, you're not a master of gilding, off you go. And so you'll be awarded within some of those categories. So it could be a bit rigorous.
By your peers?
Yes. So already master carvers.
Okay, yeah.
So was you or your partner part of the guild reviewing before? Who was first?
No,
Did you get to review his, or did he review yours?
My partner's not a master carver
He's not a master carver
he hasn't
yet.
joined.
So do you get to review his at some point?
No, so I'm not on the committee. So I think that would probably be a conflict of interest. No, but it's good. So I think I'll probably be told off for getting the history wrong, but I think it was originally set up as an organisation that was a master of carvers. So it was people whose businesses included carving.
Right.
Who may well have been master carvers themselves.
Right.
But they're in the sort of, if we look at the traditional kind of livery companies, the guilds of London, which the Master Carvers Association is not one of the ancient livery companies. It's sort of not associated with them. But the livery companies, you would originally, they were set up to sort of support trade. You would have people going through systems where, if you look at, let's say the goldsmiths company or the What's some other good ones? So I'm a member of the joiners and sealers who do joinery and carving. So they were sort of ensuring trade standards within the city. You had to be a member in order to trade within the city. So they would look for people who are apprenticed, and then you become a journeyman, you become a master, and that's quite unusual these days. But the livery companies also now run an award called the Master Certificate Scheme. So they are that's where
these ones are from.
That's where these ones are from. So they award people either apprentice, journeyman, or master certificates in their particular fields and trades.
And when did you get that?
That was I think the journeyman was a couple of years ago, quite a few years ago, and then the master certificate was after I joined the Master Carvers Association, and then I was awarded mastery by this other body. So yeah, it's. So
how long did it take you to gain mastery?
So I think the Master Carvers Association, I'd need to double check this, but I think they start accepting applications after you've been in business for somewhere 5 to 7 years, something like that.
Right, okay.
But I would imagine that a lot of people after 5 years, I certainly didn't feel ready to be considered a master carver then. So I guess there's a point at which people feel like you know enough to
apply for it.
Yeah, and you're no longer, it took a long time for me to stop that feeling when jobs came in of thinking, yes, I'll say yes, but it's going to take some time to figure out how I do this. And now I think, it's going to be fine. I know how to do this.
Yeah, you've got the confidence. You gain your confidence, don't you?
Yeah.
That's quite a good point, isn't it? To be at is that the definition of mastery, that I don't have to question, can I do it?
Yeah.
It's almost when you drop the fake it till you make it and you become like, I've already made it. That's kind of the point, isn't it?
I think the peer review is important, because I'm sure I could just be completely delusional and think I'm brilliant and actually just be terrible. So it's important to have someone else check you and say, well, yes, you're good at this, but you need to work on that bit.
Yeah, okay. And did you get that from the peer review? Even though you achieved mastery?
No, so they don't give you feedback on things, but other colleagues have, some more candid than others, let's say.
There's always one.
Yep, but it's important to hear. And the moment you think, yes, I've done carving, I can carve anything now, then give up, because you've stopped learning. I mean,
you always want to learn.
Yeah, and surely there's a point where you can just go, if you feel like that, go and take a look at some Bernini sculptures and get humble again.
There's always somebody centuries and centuries ago.
Yeah, somebody
who had nothing but a stone and a chisel that just knocked it out of the park.
There's probably loads of people now who are they're going to be better than I'm ever going to be, and I just have to make peace with that. I'm like, as long
you're
as
not
I
trying
carry
to
on,
be them, though. You're trying to be you.
But as long as I carry on trying to get better, I think it's okay.
Course.
But the point where you just think, that'll do. It's
the point.
Hang up the tools at that point.
Yeah. Not that it's always easy to financially put the hours you want to put into something. Cool. You can reach it being good and still want to
do more,
make it really exceptional, and people go, no, we're done now, there's no more budget.
That was like Matt Jackson, when we were talking about the puppets that he makes. He was always like, I need to find that cut-off point, because I could spend 100 more hours on this to make it perfect, but client's not going to know whether I spent that extra 100 hours on it or not.
And it's declining rewards over time. I mean, it is important to put the extra time in, but I think it's also, you have to, if you want to still be doing it in 10 years, you still have to make money, which is, I wish there was somebody who would just say, I'm going to pay you a salary for the next 10 years and I want you to make the most exquisite thing you can. That would make me very happy, but that doesn't happen anymore. So it's...
how is business? Is it... Because everybody's either crushing it or feeling like they're not, and it's kind of
it's really up and down.
Up and down.
I think I try and be honest with people who are training, because you're not going to make loads of money as a carver. Maybe if you become a sort of social media sensation, and but most people don't. And especially if you go into something for the love of it, you're going to be tempted to take on jobs that pay you less maybe than you should be paid, but because they're really interesting. There's it's hard. It goes up and down. Some years are great years, some years are not good years, and I think about giving up and training as something else. I mean, it's I don't, if it goes badly wrong, then I'll just get a job and do carving for fun instead. And probably make more exciting things.
But you know what? There's some comfort in the fact you've gave it a bash.
Yeah, exactly.
And as long as you keep, like, our rule is one more day. Like, just keep giving it a bash one more day, because you never know what's around the corner.
And I don't think it's a failure to say, you know what, I love doing this, but I can't support myself. I don't know, look, if my partner and I have children, what's that going to look like if we have people, you know, you can't afford to go through the lean months in the same way if you...
Yes. So,
you know, everyone has to kind of make a decision about where they're happy doing it. And hopefully you make enough to carry on, and that gets better over time. But it's not... I mean, it's the perennial, like, self-employed dilemma. If you like freedom, be self-employed, and if you like security, be employed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
But you're still here.
I'm still here. Yeah, that's, you know, I enjoy what I do, and I don't think there's a lack of people who want the kind of thing I make or that other carvers make. I think there's just, you know, connecting up with them.
Finding them, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the world's full of people who want nice things made, but I guess there's always a sort of... I find it difficult to sell. It's an abstract concept, isn't it? I mean, if I'm a plumber, if your toilet's broken, you have to employ me because your toilet's broken.
And I can fix it.
Yeah, and also, you know, I have you over the barrel. You have to pay whatever I'm charging because, you know, there's
your kitchen's slowly filling up with water.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, you know, the same with anything that's essential. And, you know, quite right, people should be paid properly for those things.
Absolutely.
But it's a harder thing to sell something that, you know, no one needs a carving, no one needs gilding on something. It's a luxury,
isn't it?
Yeah,
and
maybe you can, I think often people can command a higher price for that, but I find that a difficult thing to explain to people because it's not something they need, it's something they really want, like you said. And I think then you get into explaining where the value is, and that's a really tough thing to do. And I think really, you know, unless you're like a natural salesman, most people go into craft because they like doing the craft, not because they love selling themselves. Yeah.
Every good craftsperson ever.
Yeah.
Have you noticed a change for that in the past 10 years you've been doing it? Is there more appreciation for it now, do you think?
I think more publicly, yeah. I think like publicly. There's lots of, like you were talking about, like brands who see the value in, or at least appearing to, or supporting craft, you know, having those kind of links. And I think probably as more people are concerned about the environment and feeling more nostalgic for a time when people weren't doing, you know, really fast mass-produced things, they want to kind of go back to a place where... And it feels nice, you know, if you've commissioned someone and they make something really beautiful just for you, that's a really nice feeling. It's exciting.
Oh, yes. It really is.
It's funny you say go back to a time. There's one of the... I follow a couple of daft Instagram accounts. One of the good ones I follow is... And the thing they posted this morning was like, it was like, born to build drawbridges and drawgates in ancient castles. Yeah. No, it was born to build drawbridges and drawgates in ancient castles, whatever it was. It was obviously better written than that. Yeah. And it's born in a time to answer emails. Yeah. I was like, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not there, isn't it? But there is definitely that attraction of, oh man, I'd love to go and try that.
Yeah.
And it seems to be coming back. I definitely notice that most of the makers we speak to, a growing majority of their business is becoming the teaching, like you do.
Yeah, because everybody
you
wants
text the other day to be like, oh, let's push this back a couple of hours because you had a last minute booking this morning. It's really cool to see that.
Yeah, and it's nice. I hope that means more people are going into the craft, but I think it also means more people are understanding the work that you
goes into it, yeah.
So
it's only beneficial. Yeah. More makers are getting paid for their time. More people are understanding what goes into their time. More people are talking about it around the dinner table, because that family that was in this morning, they'll be talking about it tonight. Yeah, and probably throughout the week at work.
Yeah, I hope so. They did so well. They they made beautiful things, and it's nice. It's rewarding to see that. But I think I think attitudes are changing. I think it's interesting talking about Japan. So obviously they've got a really different setup there, and there's still lots more kind of surviving craft industry and craftsmen. But I think they saw another small island on the opposite side of the world that went through a similar kind of, no, we're done with that, we're modernising, we don't need all of that, you know. I mean, what was it, in the 60s, 70s, 80s? There was a period in the UK where they were like, no apprenticeships, trade schools, you should hope for something better, you should all go to university, and then no one knows how to put a shelf up, and we don't have enough carpenters, and you think, surprise.
Yeah, you just cut that bit out, and now there's a missed skip gen.
And now, exactly, and now I think people are realising that, and they want... I don't think we're quite to the stage where, you know, I was speaking to someone and she's French, and she said, look, in France, you know, it's a real dignity. If you say, I want to be a baker, people say, that's brilliant. That's a really dignified profession. And
cool.
I think we still have a way to get back to that. But I think people do appreciate, you know, if you can make things, people sort of see how hard it is, and social media's helped. And there's, you know, stuff on TV now where people see the kind of challenge, which, okay, they don't always represent it as accurately as possible, because it's got to fit within a TV format or be, you know, false jeopardy or whatever in it. But
it's better there than not.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
better to have it than not to have it at all.
And to say it's still, I don't know, I think it's an interesting one. But I took part in a television series that's actually, they were on the third series now, which is great.
Channel 4 one, right?
It was Sky Arts one.
Sky Arts, that was it.
Yeah, Master Crafters. So I was the Master Woodcarver. But they didn't have a false jeopardy situation. They're really trying to explain about the craft. But I had a moment with them where they said, "Oh, could you explain about how it's a really like a dying craft?" And I was like, "But it's not a dying craft. We've got a really healthy population of carvers." And they were like, could you? What do you think would happen if no one ever trained as a carver again?" And I was like, well, I mean, obviously,
probably not going to happen.
Yeah, our buildings would, you know, our carvings would fall down, all of this. But they really wanted to find that angle, and obviously that sells on TV, and it makes people feel this sort of jeopardy about craft. But I think it's a complicated thing because, like I said before, if you bring in the narrative that it's a dying craft, then people think no one does it.
People assume it is a dying craft, so they don't go looking for it.
And I don't think it's. I meet a few people who say, "Oh, I'm the only person who does this technique," or "I'm the only person," or "I'm the only woman who does." I met a woman who I'd met her before, and she said, "Oh, it's really nice to meet a female carver. It's what a pleasure." I've never met another female carver. And I said, "Oh, well, there's loads of us. There's sometimes more women than men training in wood carving." And then she said, "Oh, that's really amazing." And I met her a few years later, and somebody said, "Oh, I must introduce you to this woman. She's another carver." She said she's never met another female carver. And I thought, oh, I guess that is a selling narrative, but it's not. Being the only one is good for you, but telling people there's lots of people doing it is good for the industry.
Craft,
So telling people it's really healthy. You can find lots of people who do this. They're really skilled. You know, if you're looking for, you know, a hand engraved ring, or you're looking for someone who does beautiful mosaic, or you're looking, you know, people do this, and they're there, and there are lots of people who do it really well, and that's good. That's a really good thing. We should celebrate that. It's not glass eyeball making. You know, there are still people who do this stuff.
Well, this is exactly it. And the more people that talk about that there is people that do it, the more people end up buying from it, and it's better for the whole economy of craft.
And if somebody, you know, if there's a carver who comes along who's just doing really, really fantastic carving, that's good for the rest of us, because we have to, you know, we've got to like catch up, you know.
There's different levels, I suppose, and, you know.
Yeah, and I not kind of rest on your laurels. Or
Quite.
Yeah.
You talk about ring engraving, you've got Castor Smith.
Oh yeah, Castro,
Castro Smith. I think he's a floor up. I've seen. Unfortunately, he wasn't in last Sunday when I visited, but I've seen his work. Have you ever thought about taking your carving onto other mediums?
Oh, into
full
like
coat
in different.
Of arms.
Like what?
Full coat of arms, like a full. Could you do like a full chest plate, and like what other things could you take your carving?
Oh, what
and
you
put
mean,
it
like
onto other
different materials?
Yeah.
I don't know with metal. Like obviously I've done some bronze stuff, which I've really enjoyed actually. It feels like a bit of a cheat because I feel like I'm only halfway through the process, but I just hand it off to someone else and they make it. And you know, the bronze casting is huge skill and different people specialise in all this. It's a really big kind of team activity. So that's been nice, but I think the skill for doing really skillful engraving in like precious metals is like,
understanding the materials.
Yeah, and I think it would take me so long to, you know, obviously I have some of the skills, but it would take me a long time to train up and have that kind of. Often, if you're doing signet ring engraving, it's inside out, so you're carving the negative where I'm carving the positive of something.
That's true. So, I never thought about that. You're carving, because a lot of the engravers we know are in the States, and they're carving like a letter carving. They're carving the way rather than you're doing everything external, aren't you?
Yeah, so letter carving I would carve in, but if I was, you know, if you carve a little coat of arms in wood, it's in relief. It's not intaglio, like carved into the surface. Yeah, it's like kind of inside out thinking.
I never thought about that before.
Yeah, it's nice. Someone to talk
to kind of
yeah, exactly. And someone to talk to Castro, and he said, "Oh, I don't know how you do it," or like the other way up, and I think I couldn't do it inside out.
It's just the flip side, isn't it? You're both just the opposite way of each other.
And particularly thinking about stuff in relief. So if you're like making if you're carving a lion or something into it, and then you have to, I guess you can test it, but you stamp the ring into some wax or something. But you still, I don't know, it seems so much more difficult to wrap my head around. I guess it's what you get used to. But
it'd be interesting though, because I bet if we were speaking to him and asked the same question, it'd be the exact same answer. Just it's like the opposite way, isn't it? It's just a different thing.
Yeah, it's what you get used to, and I think it's like obviously, I'd enjoy working with other materials. Like obviously, if I work with clay, it would be interesting working with ceramic and stuff. But I guess I'd most like to do more complicated carvings, really. I think a lot of the time people commission what you already have made. They go, oh, I really like that kind of thing and I want more of that. And I say, well, why don't we do something slightly different or a bit more challenging? So I keep hoping I can try and take some time off and make something I want to make that's really, really challenging. But
you don't do that very often.
I never do that. Yeah. It's really hard to, the things I want to make, maybe it would be 6 months of working. So it's really hard to allocate that time. If I want to make a really complicated wooden statue, gilded and like polychromed and stuff, then it's hard to set that aside and then hope afterwards that someone might buy it or be able to swallow the cost of someone not buying it. Yeah. But I would prefer to make more adventurous things. So
I'm sure somebody would.
I hope so, but it's a funny push and pull, I think, and it's nice making things. Some of the most meaningful work for me is not necessarily technically challenging, but it's something that has meaning to the people that I've made it for, and it's not just going to be like put up on a wall and no one ever looks at it again. And I'd like to make, but I guess this is what everyone has problems. They want to experiment, and being able to like allocate the time is hard.
Having the time is hard.
Yeah, really hard.
So with that in mind, Brian Cush posed a question to us to ask other makers out in Australia. If there was one piece that you would be remembered for in 100 years, now it can be something you've already done or something that's on your mind to do at some point, no financial restrictions, no time restrictions. If there was one piece that you were to be remembered for in 100 years, what would it be?
That's a really tough one.
It's a tough question, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think I'm not, I guess everyone says I'm not happy. I wouldn't want to be remembered for all the stuff I've already made because I can see all the problems with it. As soon as you finish it, you think, no, I can do better next time. So I guess it would have to be something I'm making in the future. I guess probably something more into like statuary or figurative work. I really love the ornamental work, but I think... it's. I think people don't see ornamental work for some reason. Like you walk around London or any other city and there's amazing, really incredibly beautiful ornamental carving everywhere, and people are just like, oh, it's just part of a building. So it's sort of weirdly invisible.
That's true. That's
and that sounds sort of...
Everybody's on their phones though. No one's looking.
I guess no one looks. I don't know, maybe that sounds like I'm attention hungry. I don't mean it that way, but I think it's part of... What would I make if I was just making something for myself, I guess? I think I'd still make more figurative work.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that I think it's really exciting when you're like working on something and you look at like the musculature of a person or an animal, or like I find that more challenging. Mm-hmm.
I love like detail. That's for me. Like, I love the detail. When you look at something and you go up close and it's like, oh, there's so much more going on.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think it's interesting. So it's interesting looking at Gibbons, because lots of Gibbons' work, there was when they had the tercentenary of his death that I did the cravat for, they had a couple of exhibitions on. They brought lots of these amazing pieces and into galleries. I think there was one in Bonhams and one in Compton Verney. So you could see lots of these pieces really close up. And what's amazing is that, you have this sense of them being incredible kind of fantasies of birds and flowers and like lace and instruments, but up close, they're quite simple objects often, because he had a big studio with lots of people who were working at different skill levels who needed to make elements of it and be efficient. And there were a couple of other carvings in there that were by much less famous carvers, but they were like so exquisite as objects. I mean, I remember looking at one of them, and it was this, I think it was a brace of birds hung from this little like thin thread. And I just thought, oh, I'm never going to be able to make something that nice. You can look at Gibbons and sort of see how lots of the illusion is done, but this person had done such like microscopically fine detail. But it was arguably less effective than kind of Gibbons' big sort of, fantastic pieces.
Yeah.
So, but there is something so nice about when like with Dutch still lifes, you get closer and closer to the painting, and they just get like more and more beautiful. Yeah. So, I like that I think I'd like to make something like that, where it looks impressive and it rewards you for looking closer. But that's a pretty vague answer. So
when you
it's a
find
difficult one.
When you find out what it is, you can let us know. Because I think it's of equal weight whether like Paul, when we were sat in his studio in Ireland, he's like, you're sitting on it. That chair is what I want to be remembered for. And then there's the other side of it where people like yourself are like, I've no idea yet. I know there's something, but I'll work it out.
I've got a lot of time yet to figure that one out.
Yeah, I hope so. Because I feel like you always hear about musicians who've made their like hit single and they're like, I'm never going to make something that good again. And I think that must be so much
pressure on that.
Must be quite dispiriting. Yeah. So I kind of hope that never happens. True. I hope that never happens where I'm like, that's the best I can do. That would make me a bit sad, I think.
I think it would. Yeah, I think it would.
Lewis Capaldi, for a good example.
I dropped that banger of an album, everything was going really well, and he's completely disheartened as doing any more music.
Yeah, I just don't think he's doing anything else, because it's just like, how am I meant to...
How do you top it?
Yeah, how do I? Like, I don't want that pressure on myself. Like, I don't want it to go down the way. I'd rather just end on a high.
Yeah, quite.
I guess so much of that is to do with the relationship of your work with the general public as well. But I would hopefully still be carving even if no one ever saw the carvings.
Yeah.
So I guess they're two separate questions.
Yeah, that's a good indication if you're doing the right thing. Because if you would still be doing it. Like, if nobody ever listened to this podcast ever again, we would still be having these conversations with people. It would not faze me in the slightest. Like, we really enjoy doing it. Yeah. And I think that's a good indication you're doing the right thing.
I hope so. I think if I consider the work I want to make in the context of other people seeing it, then I guess I would want it to be more meaningful to you would want it to have some kind of meaning to the people who are engaging with it. Yeah. Rather than just be meaningful for you. Yeah. But it's complex. I don't know how you're making things to be seen is like different experience.
Very.
What's your feelings about social media?
I'm really I'm like a social media neophyte. I really try, but I don't.
Do you feel it's important for you, or do you not feel like you need to do it as much as?
I don't need to do it financially. I don't really get any work out of social media.
Right.
I can imagine that if I had a big social media following, maybe I would do more teaching work. But yeah, I'm glad that my business doesn't rely on social media. Okay. I get most of my work from word of mouth. I might meet someone, have a nice conversation, and they might remember me 3 years later and then just give me a call. So I like that. But I think if I look at the younger generations, they're living this sort of partially online life in a way that I don't really understand, and probably more work is going to have to come from social media and the internet than I would probably like in the future. So I feel like it's a job I don't want to do that I have to tackle. Yeah. And like I don't really like talking about. I don't want to share my personal life on social media, and I think it's nice having a conversation and talking with the both of you and talking about my thoughts about the profession or the craft. Yeah. But I feel like social media can be very demanding, kind of socially, and people. Yeah. I think I would not like to be recognised in the street from social media. That would be an absolute nightmare. So,
so fame isn't. Famous, you know.
Oh my god, yeah, I know people engage with posts which have your face in more, and so occasionally people say you should post more like pictures of you doing the work, but I don't enjoy that. I don't.
Then don't do it.
Yeah, but finding a way where partly social media relies on you engaging with a person, not like people don't want to engage with a brand. They want to see you making the things. They want to hear your thoughts about stuff. And I think there's probably a good way of doing that Like you mentioned, like Florian Gadsby earlier. Like I felt like he like kind of straddled the line between being very like private on social media.
Yeah, he drew a line in the sand from the very start and was just like, if it's about my ceramics and about my work, it goes on there. If it's about anything else in my life, it doesn't go on there. And we had a really long conversation with him, of which a good portion, because he's obviously huge on social media, nearly 1 million followers on Instagram alone, way more on YouTube and on TikTok. But like,
but it must be so demanding
from the start. Yeah, and he also says in that podcast, I think he worked out he's doing about 12 hours a week just on social media.
Yeah.
And it's providing him, YouTube ad revenue. It's providing him work through his Instagram, through his newsletter, sign-ups, etc., etc. But he's decided that's a part of his business that he needs. Because although he's selling high-priced ceramics, they are £40 to £250. They're not a couple of £1,000. They're not. You need to sell a volume of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is very much a part of his business that he's had to negotiate.
Yeah.
And if I remember rightly, he's not the biggest fan of it. He's just aware that it has to happen.
Yeah. I think
so if it doesn't have to happen, like we love it because it's afforded us loads of opportunities and loads of abilities to find people like you and hear about Cockpit. And
well, that's the nice bit, is that sometimes you can connect up with people you wouldn't have spoken to otherwise. I've spoken to some really, really interesting people, just quite unexpectedly. But I think, look, I'd be blind to... I'm not blind to the advantages. I'm sure that if I had 100,000 followers, then I would have opportunities that I don't otherwise have. But I haven't found a way
that's comfortable for you.
Yeah. And I think, again, like we talked about people making iterations of things, like pottery is a very good one for that. If you have a style and like, okay, we use like Florian Gadsby again, he's got really distinctive style and he photographs things in a distinctive style. And people go, I love those photographs, I love those things. They don't want that to change. You can do iterations, and if you make 100 pots, 100 mugs, then you have 100 different variations of a thing to photograph. And I think I haven't found a way of representing, doing carving in this style one day and working on a sculpture in bronze the next day in a way that I think gets those kind of numbers on social media.
That would make sense to your followers, like following different things.
I've had really nice people on Instagram and stuff, but I guess I can't. I don't know. I should just set aside like half an hour a day to do social media stuff. But I find it taxing. I don't want to sit there.
One day a week. Maybe?
Yeah. Well, you have to keep carving stuff, and actually like. I don't know, I've just basic stuff like setting up a camera rig or, a way you can film the carving. With wood carving, you're moving around it a lot. So a lot of the time I will be physically blocking the camera angle. So it's very difficult to
pair of glasses.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There we are. There we are.
Yeah. Pair of camera safety specs.
Yeah. It's so, I don't know, I'm sure there's a way of kind of doing it. Then I see people, doing the social media thing, but I like talking to people in person. Like I get...
Word of mouth is one of the best ways to get business, though, isn't it?
And people might spend like £40 to £200 on Instagram. They're not going to spend thousands of pounds. Like they might have met me, see that I do things, check the website, meet me again a couple of times, and then think, yes, no, I do trust this person. But it's a lot of money. And I don't think. I think it's interesting. It's a nice way of popularising craft, but I have a mixed relationship with it.
That's one thing that I think is unarguably good about social media, is it's really popularised craft. And going back to what you were saying about there is other carvers out there, like it's shown the world there is other carvers.
Yeah.
It's really good for that.
And like you said, it connects people up. I'm always astounded that anyone finds me off social media, to be honest, but it's great. It's really nice they do. I mean, I had a really lovely conversation. So I'm undertook some training this year, and I'm going to be doing a bit next year in 3D modelling and 3D scanning and kind of CNC, and like how can we use that stuff in a way that's useful for carving and isn't going to degrade the skill and is a tool in the carver's arsenal. And there was a really nice chap who's worked in like film and did kind of visual effects and texturing film. We got in contact and had a really fantastic discussion and offered me advice, and I thought, that's amazing. That would never have happened without social media. So that stuff's lovely. That's really, really nice. And you can share information and kind of...
Yeah, connect with people like that. I know.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good one. But
look, it needs to work for you. Ultimately, it needs to work for you, whether you're into X, Y, or Z. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you.
Well, I guess it's... I think lots of people really enjoy it, and I guess I don't enjoy it. Like, it makes me nervous. I don't know what the protocol is. You know, if somebody sends me an emoji response to a story, like, what's the etiquette? Do I answer? Do I say, like, thanks? Like, I find that stressful.
Just let the hype, the heart.
So I should just treat it like a part of my business and just set aside time for it. And that's always in the back of my head.
You should or should not do anything. Only if you want to and you find it has benefit for you.
I think it probably would, but it's...
Because your work is very...
the open studio, getting people in front of your work.
Yeah,
like social media is only a second, I think, to getting people in front of your work.
Yeah.
The reality is, there's billions of people on the planet that'll never be able to step into this workshop like we have, or like many people did last weekend at the open studios here at Cockpit.
Like, share that as well. It's nice.
Yeah.
Share that experience. It's
because this will always trump any social media stuff. It's just you're unable to do that.
I guess I always have this like sense, which I know is silly, because I like looking at people's Instagram, and I like when they share information about how they're making stuff or the place they're working. I find that really interesting, or their thoughts on making. But every time I go to post anything,
I know what you're going to say here,
who cares? Why am I just, like, it's so kind of self-aggrandizing, you're egotistical and post about yourself, where it's like all the stuff everyone gets told as a kid, and you think, it's so arrogant, like, who's going to care? And you have to try and set that aside and think, yes, okay, somebody might care, but it doesn't...
There's like 3 billion users, someone will like it, you know what I mean? Someone will like it.
Yeah, but I mean, the world's changed. I mean, I see people kind of, doing the selfie stick thing and like posing and pouting, and I don't know, I was on holiday and there was there was a lady we were at this like amazing place, and there was a lovely, beautiful lake, and there's a lady on this sort of board, and we sat there maybe for an hour having a chat and enjoying stuff, and she was just rowing backwards and forwards and taking selfies like that, and then going through and going, no, just taking a different one. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you're not enjoying
anything. Never took in any of the surrounding around.
But didn't care, didn't feel self-conscious either, and I thought, God, I wish I had like a little drop of that. Like, I don't want to be that person, but it'd be nice to not feel like that. Who cares?
It'd be nice to know when to be that person.
Yeah.
Because there is like 5 minutes a day that you could afford to be that person for the benefit of your business, if it did benefit your business. As you say, you don't feel it does, so you don't have to.
I mean, I can imagine it could, but it's just getting over that hurdle and thinking, people do, like, some number of people are interested, and that's I think that, like you said, so many people who make stuff just can't imagine.
I mean,
it's day to day for us.
Well, we're trying to find makers for the magazine or even a podcast, and I see this amazing work, and I cannot find the person behind it anywhere.
Oh, really?
And sometimes go to the website and it's like there's no about me page, and I'm like, I want to know more about you. What do you look like? Like, how can we connect? You know?
Yeah.
But
and there is people like you and I out there constantly looking for interesting people.
Yeah. So it's always nice to like see the person's face and like, it doesn't have to be everywhere. It's just.
And I like hearing about why people make stuff and how they got into it. And
I love it. Absolutely love it. You learn so much from it.
Yeah, and there's always really interesting stories. I mean, I also listen to the Life Scientific, which is radio and on podcast, and they interview like leading scientists on how they became. And so many of them say, I failed all of my GCSEs and I came to it later. And you think, this is really encouraging. I think it's nice to hear that. And the same thing with craft. Hear people that say, I was never any good at making anything, and then I discovered this thing, and I realised that, it's inspiring. But
that's cool.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that anyone thinks that about you.
Yes. Like, who cares that I'm doing this today? Probably nobody. But there is people who actually like, what is she up to? I want to know.
Yeah.
There's people that have sat at a desk all week that only dream of being able to move a chisel through wood like you do.
Yeah, this is what I try and remember when I'm finding carving really distressing and like I'm not getting paid enough and it's frustrating. I think, I could be at a desk, so at least if it's going badly, I can like finish early, go home, and like work longer the next day.
Exactly, you can decide, right, this is enough for me today. I've had enough. I need to go home and reset and come back in tomorrow when I decide to come in tomorrow. Yeah. And
I guess maybe it's more in my case than other crafts. I mean, lots of other craft people are making things that get used, so there's a sense of purpose for that. But there's something nice about making things that you're just trying to make something really beautiful, and hopefully that's something that. I go into museums and sometimes you see these like incredible little like ceramics or carvings or something that you can walk by and they're so beautiful and somebody's made them hundreds or thousands of years ago and they're still here because people thought they were beautiful for that long. And that's
it's just this, they've kept it because it is that beautiful.
If I can make one beautiful thing before I die, I'm gonna die happy. I'm not there yet. But that's the answer to that question. If I can make something really, really beautiful, then that's...
I mean, you've already done lots of beautiful things.
No, I've made big things and I've made like complex things, but I don't think I've made anything really beautiful yet. I'm not happy.
Really?
No,
so that would be something that's big, complex, and beautiful, all wrapped up in one wrapper.
Or just, I don't know, it's so difficult because I can point, if we went round the V&A or the British Museum, I can point to things and say, yeah, that's incredibly beautiful. But I don't know what the quality is, but there's something where people just got something right. And there are moments where I think, I've got this little bit right, but I don't think I've made...
Interesting.
Is that not what the French word je ne sais quoi is?
Yeah, well, yeah, there we are.
That is it, isn't it?
That's it.
Je ne sais quoi is it's a quality that can't quite be described, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'd like.
That came up in office chat this week.
Oh, did it? Wow.
It did,
what are you talking about?
Very
I can't
international.
remember.
Yeah.
It's not a very international office. Kate, wrap up question.
Yeah, what advice would you give your younger self?
What advice would I give my younger self? I think, I think probably train as a joiner first or a cabinet maker. have more of the practical stuff. I started carving and thought I would then train as a cabinet maker afterwards, and I didn't find the time to do that. It's a big commitment to do that much. But I think if I look back, I wish I had more. I've only got carving as a skill, and obviously that entails lots of skills, but I don't have anything to fall back on that I also love that's not carving. So I kind of have to make this work. I could move into a related field, but I think it's... I
think you'd have more transferable skills than you think that you do, though.
Yeah.
I'm sure I would,
that as well.
but I guess it would give me more security to have something else like that you can...
Yeah, I hear that.
Maybe less like drive to just make the carving work, but...
Well, that's always the trade-off, isn't it? Like the drive in doing one thing, or... Yeah, do you water down... Because you've only got so many hours in a day, do you water that down by having a backup, or do you just go all in on one?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think...
Bit of an unanswerable question, really, isn't it? Because you can't live two lives.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, for me at least, I would probably tell myself to leave school as soon as possible. I did well in school, but I don't feel like having good A-levels had any dignity at all. It wasn't... No one thinks anything of it.
Yeah, like what did you study and like what grades did you get? It's not...
Yeah, nobody cares really out in the real world, and they care if you're going to university. But I think if I'd left school at 16 and trained as a cabinet maker, I would have felt a level of self-respect quicker than I did. And I think it's nice to know you can do something and do something well, and that feels really good.
Yeah.
And I think, that takes a long time. I wish someone had found me earlier and given me some advice and said, I don't like the academic stuff. I can do it, but I don't enjoy it. And I wish I'd had other options made available or made seem acceptable. I mean, my family never made it. Yeah, they're very creative and very supportive of lots of that stuff. But I think in school, no one ever tells you that trade professions are acceptable.
No.
Like most people are saying, no, you should aspire for better. And that was rubbish. I think it...
Yeah.
Kind
of tried to mold you
now. I think that's changing, certainly, like in the last 5 years. Like my mum and dad are obviously very settled. Me going to university, and my brother's going to university. Brothers are 10, 11 years younger than me. One of them's a welder, one of them's in the army. And, and they were, my mum and dad were, very encouraged of them doing something physical. So there's definitely been some sort of shift.
Yeah, that's good. I really hope
it's too late for me, but there's definitely been some sort of shift. I've done right.
I think just making it feel like it's acceptable is good.
Creative industries was never really seen as like be an artist. No, you don't want to be an artist. You don't make money.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess lots of people like working with their hands, and they can do the other stuff, but they like working with their hands more. And so we need people who make things. Like let's make that a dignified thing to do, and a respectable thing to do, because it's highly skilled.
Yeah, very highly skilled.
Yeah, that's what I wish I'd felt more of early on, or like knowing that it was an option.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah.
But equally, there's always two sides to every story, isn't there? That at least you found that in your 20s and not your 50s.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that are finding it in their retirement. You know, you could have found it way later.
Yeah.
You also could have found it way, way, way later, couldn't you?
But I'm sure, you know, if I hadn't become a carver, maybe I would have done science instead. Or, I think there are lots of things I could have done that I would have found just as interesting.
Yeah.
But probably quite practical stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh, brilliant. It's been so nice to talk to you both.
I know.
Very, very quickly, where do people find out about you? Where do people book your classes, your book carvings off your book? Where does everyone find out?
So
I've got a website, cluniefretton.com, and I've also got an Instagram, Clunie Fretton, at Clunie Fretton.
Nice.
I'm not on the other social media.
Yeah, so just one's enough.
I know.
One is plenty. Yes. Thank you so much for your time. And thanks for shoehorning us in. I know I dropped it on you last minute.
No, it worked out well.
But it'll be great.
Podcast 99, huh?
Podcast 99, just about to break the 100 mark.
I know.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I know.
Anyway.
That's really impressive.
I don't know, how many have we actually done this year?
So much fun.
I don't know.
When did you start doing the podcast?
23?
September, late 23, September, October
Okay.
23.
Yeah, so you've like rattled through. You've done a lot of them.
We try and average one a week. We're a little bit slow on that. I say average one a week. We'll go away and do 7 or 8 at a time and then come back. With me jumping back into contracting, it's been a bit slower.
Yeah.
But we're next year 1 a week.
Yeah.
100%.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
But it's nice that you just do the setup with just the filming as well, because you're not having to tie yourself into doing like hours and hours and hours of editing. You know,
everybody wants like the more legit, like, you know, honest way of doing things. Like, it doesn't have to be 6 cameras in a room and like, you know, everything
My
else.
attraction to I've listened to podcasts forever. I'm not a big music person, but I've always been a podcast person. And my attraction to podcasting was it was media that was detached from the mainstream media.
Yeah.
It didn't have a narrative, it didn't have a big studio, it didn't have a production team, it just had a conversation.
Yeah.
And then video came in, which was great for us because we get a lot of our social media content from the video.
Yeah.
So, but like, ideally, with like a couple more cameras that could just be left to run in the background like that, so we had better angles. And made the video
your best angle.
made the video more engaging when we put it up on YouTube. Our main platform being YouTube, and then the audio goes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
But I just really loved the fact it was just an unfiltered conversation.
Yeah.
There was no script. Like, we didn't present you with the questions beforehand. No. Like, we've only been asked that maybe twice. Someone was like, "Can you send questions ahead of time?" I was like, "It's not how this works."
It's like
I'm left with the panic. I've probably said something I shouldn't have.
No, you haven't.
I hope not.
No.
You've absolutely not.
It's been a pleasure.
It's
I'm
been
really glad.
an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, I'm
I really, really respect and admire the time that not goes into doing the craft, but to learn the history. Yeah. That's what was the real attraction from last Sunday, is that you're as much a historian as you are a craftsperson, because I think that really informs your work.
I try to be. I mean, I don't... Real historians will beg to differ.
Yeah, but historians can't carve wood.
Yeah, I suppose so. I think it's important to know the historic context of stuff, because otherwise it's going to look weird as well. You're going to do a weird kind of
having the understanding and the background of what you're actually doing is
and it's interesting as well.